Hi all, Andy here and welcome back to the channel. The day is finally here. We're going to start with the engine removal.
This video is based on the slam panel removal on the Mk1 Audi TT to access the engine itself for removal. Something to consider before starting and something I discuss later is your air conditioning system. If it is currently gassed and pressurised, you will need to get the car degassed professionally before starting the dismantling process. The Freon gas is toxic and should only be handled by an AC specialist. As always, I accept no responsibility for loss or damage from following the steps in this video, and it is for entertainment purposes only. I will also put on screen the tools I've used for this job and will try and add part numbers to items as I work through during the slam panel removal. Right, onto the video.
So the first step for me is to roll the car out of the garage. We're going to take the wheels off, take the wheel liners out so we can access the bolt for the front bumper and get the front end off. Now I do cover the removal of the front bumper in a separate video, so if you'd like to see a detailed version of that video, then please do click the link above. But we're going to rattle through that quite quickly, talking about the steps right now to get the front end off. So let's get started. Now for those of you that are unaware, in the toolkit in the boot of the car is this little gadget, this little metal P. What that's for is to put through your hub trims in the middle, give the wheel a pull. Oh dear. Oh dearie dearie me. Now there is some damage on this centre cap along with the two that I've just pulled off. That's telling me that these probably are on, firstly rather tight, but secondly I think these are aftermarket wheels and aftermarket caps, and hence why they failed. I might need a screwdriver to get those off. Okay, and that's answered the question, because these wheels have got two sets of bolt holes, and that's because they come with the 100 stud pattern and the 112 stud pattern. So these wheels will fit both Mark 1 and a Mark 2, but they're not genuine because I don't believe Audi made genuine wheels that had the dual stud pattern. So much for the wheel trims. Now luckily these little plastic studs just push back in, so they're not technically broken. Next step is to loosen the bolts off before we jack the car up and remove the wheel. So that's the nuts nice and loose. I'm now going to jack the car up and get it on axle stands. So interestingly, now I'm under the car, I'm getting a good look at this floor, and I've used the sill to jack the car up because my jack doesn't want to work and push the car up high enough. The sill that would run along here seems to have been pushed up just here. So I think this might be the damage from the cat in. I think it might have pushed the floor up. Now the actual chassis rails all look okay, but the floor's had a bit of a shove up here. So I'm going to take a good look at that, see what's going on. But we've got the car on an axle stand now. So now we can get this front wheel off and get the liner out at least to start the removal of the engine. With the wheel off, we now need to attack all these T20 Torx bits around the wheel liner to get the wheel liner off, to get to the bolts that hold the bumper in place just behind here. Just to give you an idea of what builds up behind your sills. This should not be here. And this is just dirt. Same here, look. And this is why your sills rot away. So take your wheel arch liners out regularly and give this a clean. With the wheel off, the liner out and the 2 bolts undone here from the bumper, I'm able to peel this away from its fixtures and fittings on this side, but I'm going to put the wheel back on for now. Now I've got the liner out, because I don't need to do any more work here for now, but by returning the wheel to the car, it will allow me to make it mobile and move it back into the garage once I need to. Now, interestingly, I've got all of the fixtures and fittings for the wheel arch liner here in this piece of cardboard, and the nut that was holding the front bumper on. It only had one nut holding it in place because the other nut is missing. Now, there would normally be under here an engine under tray, but that seems to be missing from this car. But we still need to remove these 2 Phillips screws. Now, as well as having the Torx bits for your various tools, I'd also recommend a set of these long, like Allen bolt Torx bits as well, because they give you a bit more accessibility and leverage on some of the bigger bolts. And that's because there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these T30 Torx bolts that hold the top of the bumper in place. Now, if any of these are appearing to be stiff, it's worth giving them a squirt with WD-40, but they tend to come out okay. And that should now allow the bumper, as you can see, just to come forward. And there is this reinforced metal plate that comes out as well, you need to put to one side. That's the bumper totally detached, and I think we can start to lever that off, and it comes off quite easily like that. So there we have the bumper detached from the car. Now, you will notice that it's not completely off, and that's because there is a hose that connects your headlight washers to the car, and that water bottle is in the passenger wheel well. So we will disconnect that hose completely. A lot of people leave the hoses disconnected and don't worry about the headlight washers because they tend to fail and don't squirt anyway. Before this, I'm just going to loosen the washer pipe and remove the bumper. And the pipe has this quick release clip here that you just, like a U-clip, that you peel off like so, and that allows the 2 pipe to come apart. Now, you will lose some fluid because obviously there's washer fluid still left in the car, but that's not a massive problem. Now, with the bumper off and the wheels back on the car, I'm going to store this safely in the garage, roll the car back into position. Now, it's looking pretty sorry for itself already, but and I'm out of breath from pushing it, but we can now work on removing all of this so we can get the engine out this way. Now, I can see if I want to remove this piece here, which is going to free up all of this area here to get to the engine, I need to remove the headlights. Now, by taking these headlights out, it's not going to be too much of a problem because this one's damaged anyway. So even though we're taking it out, unlikely we'll keep that. However, we might look to replace that lens if that's possible to do so. So again, looks like I'm on a T25 Torx bit to remove the headlights. And these simply undo with 2 bolts at the top, like so. One bolt down here holding the frame on. So again, if you were replacing the headlights on your car, if you need to remove them for any reason, you do need to remove the bumper to get the access. And with those out, we can just lift the headlight forward like so, and you can see on the back of the headlight you've got the wiring loom. Just going to disconnect that. It's connected in 2 places. Now, I've got 3 bolts here for removing the headlight. 2 short ones go in the top part of the headlight, and I'm just going to screw them back into that frame for now, and this longer one obviously goes in here. And to free up that second electrical connector, I need my electrical connector disconnect tool. Like so. And that removes that broken headlight. Again, we can see it's got that crack in it, so we would unlikely to be using that again. Repeat the process on the other side of the car. So that's our headlights off, and it's starting to look quite a bare-fronted vehicle now. It's hard to even know what car that would be. We can now remove the 2 top bolts that secure this whole front section to the car. Now my concern is by undoing these, is the whole front end going to fall forwards. Down here, the crash bar is still in place. And when I've seen these front ends coming off the TT in the past, it looks like there's 2 flat panels that remain. So this bar needs to be unbolted from those panels. But I'm going to see what happens if I undo these 2 bolts. Is it all going to fall apart horribly for me? Doesn't appear so, so I think it must be secured elsewhere. In fact, before I remove these completely, I'm going to see if we can remove that crash bar from the car. Now there appears to be 3 bolts that are holding the crash bar to the car itself. I think there might be 13mm bolts, and there is enough room for me to get the socket head. And I think these must be stretch bolts because they're only literally done up on 1 thread, it feels like, and then it undoes by hand like so. And there's 3 of these bolts. The bottom bolt seems to be obscured by the air scoop for the intercooler, so it's just behind here. So I'll remove the 2 top ones first, and then we'll look to remove the bottom one separately. These just undo by hand. And now I just need to remove this bottom bolt, if I can give you a look down in there. So that just pops off by the look of it, that cover. Oh, there you go, that comes off nice and easy. So there's the air scoop cover. That gives us much better access to this crash bar bolts. See how easy they come undone. Now there's also a Phillips screw for some reason. If I just give you a view of that. Just this little Phillips screw. I don't know if that's just an extra safety measure. There's also one down here as well. So we'll undo those 2. And that allows me to pull the crash bar away from the car. So we'll repeat the process on the other side. Behind the bar here, there are 3 bolts. And we will remove this air scoop first, which just unclips. That gives us much more area to work with around the side here. Just simply loosen that bolt and it comes free. Remove the bottom bolt. As I'm undoing this last bolt, I can feel the weight of the crash bar. So I'm going to support it with my hand. Phillips screwdriver as well on this. And undo these 2 Phillips screws. So with all 6 bolts out, all 4 Phillips screws out, this should just lift straight off the car like so. And now we're getting down to the business end of this removal. I can see this structure that holds the radiator, this plastic housing across the front, was sandwiched in between the car itself and the crash bar mounts. So I won't put these bolts back in because that will stop me removing this in the future. Now, because I want to keep all these bolts together, I'm going to put them in this coffee jar because I know there's 6 bolts and the 4 Phillips screws. I'll do that up and I'll write on the jar what these parts or bolts are for. So when it comes to reassembly, I've got them all together, just like so. And being in a jar, it's airtight or watertight, so I can save all my old jars and put all the bolts together so they won't get mixed up. Before we start removing any of this substructure, I can see there's a few sensors and wires that run along the bottom of the radiator and the AC condenser, and it appears that they are terminating on the driver's side. So if I can disconnect that plug, and then I can undo these clips and pass it all through, it will stop those being ripped off or damaged when I actually remove the front end. And then the wiring seems to be just in these clips that undo. You flip the tab over like so and undo it, and then the wire comes out. And there's another connector just here as well, which you pinch like that. Now interestingly, we've got different style tabs on this side, and these ones you pinch together and pull the cover over like so. So we pinch together the clip and it comes off like that. Double connected, a T20 Torx bit, so we can probably remove that entirely with part of the loom. Now this wire is mounted on the passenger side of the clip, and you literally push it open and that pops out like so. And then we need to release this clip, and then almost the whole of this bottom loom will be free from the plastic housing. With both of these horns disconnected either side of the radiator, this front substructure is pretty much free from being removed, other than the 4 bolts that hold it in position. I've shown you the 2 at the top, but there's also one either side here, just inside the wing. There's a 10mm bolt on either side of the car. They too need to be undone. And once they are removed, there's nothing holding this in place other than the fixtures on the inside of the radiator. The bonnet release cable is also in place, needs to be disconnected, and the loom for the fans. And of course, the various rubber tubes that supply the coolant at the front. So we're going to need to work inside the car now. I have removed these 4 bolts, so this will just lift forward if there was nothing else securing it in place. But we'll disconnect the bits inside the engine bay to allow us to remove the radiator and the front substructure. The bonnet release mechanism also needs to come off to remove this front panel, and the way you do that is you get a pair of long nose pliers or some sort of pry tool around the back of the ball of the end of it, and then lift it very slowly to the left, and that will allow us to remove that from the housing. And to do this, we need to slide this down this plastic socket out of the holder, and that will remove the cable from the bracket. So that's the bonnet release out. We can just feed that back inside the wing for now, because that doesn't need to come off the car, but that gives us one more part removed from this front panel. To remove this plug, simply press top and bottom of the metal bracket, pull towards, and it will come off like so, and that will disconnect the loom from the radiators. And you'll also need to unclip it from the housing. Now the coolant has been removed from my radiator. I've already removed all the coolant from the system, so I now need to disconnect this hose clip to remove this hose from the engine block. I'm going to get some mole grips to remove that, push that together like so. I should now be able to move that down the rubber hose, so I can disconnect that from that plastic piece there. The hope for that should just disconnect. Might need a bit of persuasion. Now these have been on for 20 years, don't forget, so be gentle with them as they come apart, because you don't want them to perish, because they'd be very hard to replace. There we go, there was some coolant that just splashed out towards the end there. Front substructure is already feeling a lot more loose. So to give an overview of where that's come off from, it's on the passenger side here. So there's a couple more pipes in here that we need to disconnect. Despite all these connectors, this will now almost fully come off. And I'm going to lean that forward so you can get a better view of what we've got left to do. Now what we have are these 3 electrical connections here that we need to remove that connect to the radiator and the fans. There's also some more hoses that need to come off, including the air conditioning connector just down here. Now it's worth pointing out that if you've got a non-runner such as this, you are going to need to get someone out to decompress the air conditioning and remove the gas, because it is freon and it is toxic to you. And you do that by getting someone out, and they connect a valve onto your relief valve just there, and they suck the gas out. And if you find a nice friendly one, they'll also come back and top it up as part of that deal. It's cost me about £60 to get that done. So we found another electrical connection just here on the back of the rad, so we'll get that one off.
So that's one more connection gone. That was a nice easy one to disconnect. So we'll pass that through there, although that will remain with the fan. And the second fan connector, I wish they all came apart that easy. And that's the last one off also. You need to remove this hex bolt from the air conditioning pipe where it joins onto the condenser before disconnecting. So this is the pipe that connects to the back of the condenser on the front. Next we need to unbolt the refrigerant line from the AC dryer and also disconnect and remove it from the slam panel housing. Now that's come out nice and easy towards the end. Slowly to show you what I'm removing. That does seem to be quite restrictive still because I can't slide it out. Oh, there we go. I can slide it just past the radiator housing, I think, like so. To make removal of the AC dryer easier, I found the best thing to do is remove the bolt completely, and that will allow the bracket to free up enough, as you can see it comes apart, that you slide the inner part down, and that will give you enough clearance to remove the AC dryer. Again, we'll put that bolt back in there. Like so, now with the air conditioning disconnected, the hoses disconnected, and those electrical connectors disconnected, and the bonnet release disconnected, we can remove this entire front substructure from the car. So there we have that entire front end of the Mk1 removed, and we are left with this view. Wouldn't maintenance on these cars be much easier if we had access to the engine like this at most times? Now we've got some interesting elements here. I think this is actually the air conditioning compressor, where I was referring to this little chap as it, but I think that's your compressor right there. Just up above here you've got your alternator, and of course if you had this sort of access, removing and changing the alternator would also be much easier. You've also got access now to the oil filter, as we can see right here. The gearbox sitting just over here. So that's my video on how to remove the slam panel from your Audi TT Mk1, and the first part in the removal of the engine from the engine bay. Join me in part 2, where we'll start to remove some of the ancillary components such as the alternator and the expansion tank, and also the air intake, while we take the next step towards removing this engine from the engine bay. If you've enjoyed today's content, then please do give it a thumbs up, and also think about subscribing to my channel if you've not already done so, where you'll find a whole host of content on the Audi TT Mk1. As always, thanks for watching and see you soon. Take care.